Welcome to my February 2025 essay/story. I've titled this one The Jacket Story. It was November, and I was a little breathless after a 20-minute walk to Kamala Harris's local campaign office. I had a hurried orientation, a lovely conversation with a stranger, and I bustled right back out the door into the light with a clear packet in my hand. I squinted, feeling strong and independent. I had a new app on my phone that helped me track all of the houses I was going to visit, and I was wearing my cool new jacket, the jacket that I had just bought myself as a treat. I don't often buy new clothes, but my relationship with mirrors was in kind of a rough patch. I traditionally love mirrors. I love making faces. I love looking myself in the eye. I love doing little dances. But lately, my eye in the mirror had been drawn to my receding hairline, my bland choice of blues, grays, and green clothes. My little dances looked a little lackluster. Something in the mirror wasn't working for me. I get that for a lot of folks, mirrors are pretty rough, but for me, this was a new and unwelcome thing. So I got myself some hair powder, I got my ear pierced, I bought some new clothes that I liked looking at, and chief among those clothes was this jacket, which was a pretty gutsy purchase for me. It was a light fall jacket with this kind of super cool fall-colored pattern, and the first day I wore it, I literally got 3 or 4 compliments. I traveled to San Francisco in it, and random people in coffee shops would say, "Nice jacket." This was an entirely new experience for me because I am usually a pretty conservative dresser, and honestly, it felt amazing. You should all go buy yourselves a nice gutsy jacket. It is totally worth it. But today was for knocking on strangers' doors. I wore the jacket because I thought it would help. I thought it was going to give me some kind of armor or extra confidence because knocking on strangers' doors is not something that I am very brave about. Circus? No problem. Climbing high in the air? No problem. Watching as my students, following my directions, risk their life and limb to do something that is totally unnecessary? No problem. Knocking on a stranger's door to ask them if they're planning to vote? Completely impossible. As I arrived at my houses, my cool new jacket suddenly felt expensive. It felt like a luxury item. And my houses were not luxury type houses. I just kept having flashes of myself, this uppity white boy in a fancy jacket here in North Philly. And I was embarrassed. So embarrassed that I called my partner and asked him to bring me a more standard pedestrian hoodie. It was cold, I lied. We lived nearby, and so when he arrived a few minutes later, I confessed my discomfort with my current jacket. "That's silly," he said. "You look great, but if this new hoodie makes it easier, go for it. I get that it can be scary." Consummate support. Ugh. I low-key wish I had someone to blame for my fear, but no such luck. I was apparently on my own as far as excuses went. So I gave it my best shot. I walked up to a door. I checked my phone. I glanced at the windows. It was on this entire block of red brick row homes, just wall to wall to wall. It was cold outside. I almost lifted my hand, but decided that this house in particular did not want to be bothered. I put the literature that I had on their door and somewhat abashedly marked Lit Drop on my app. I did 1 block of my 5 this way, resolved that I was very bad at this, and that I would come back tomorrow armed with companions who were capable of knocking on doors. The funniest part of this story, ever since I can remember, I have had this superpower, which is that things that make other people feel weird don't make me feel weird at all. Talking about race, no problem. Talking about sex, no problem. Talking about money, no problem. Talking about things that I did that were bad or wrong or offensive to someone, no problem. Talking about eating disorders, no problem. I have always been amused by the lengths that people around me go to avoid feeling cringe or awkward. Don't get me wrong, I also hate feeling cringe or awkward. It's just that things that normally set other people off don't really make me feel that way. Except for knocking on doors, apparently. At the root, I think I'm talking about pride and shame, about how we encounter our fears and how very real fear feels when we actually encounter it. In my master's research, pride and shame emerged as the emotions with the most association with future behaviors and current behaviors. One of the emotional researchers I used quite a lot, Reinhard Pekrun, calls pride and shame outcome retrospective emotions. They're feelings that emerge as reactions as we think back on an event or remember something we did. You don't feel pride about a test that you haven't taken yet. You can't feel ashamed of something that hasn't happened. The flip side, in Pekrin's theory, is the experience of outcome prospective emotions like hope or anxiety, feelings that are reactions to an imagined future. I had such hope for myself that day. Brave and cool-looking, I would knock on doors in a swing state neighborhood, single-handedly helping to tip the vote away from the Cheeto monster who is currently our president. Hope. A fast shift to anxiety. A quick turnaround to embarrassment. Looking back, I can't help thinking about students showing up to their first movement classes, that they might feel paralyzed in the same way I did, that they might just feel out of place. In my case, I was anxious and ashamed of my nice jacket, my white skin, the fact that I own my house nearby. I was embarrassed to knock on doors of people who are less fortunate. I think I've always been a bit embarrassed about my fortune. Not that I have a literal fortune, but my luck. I'm not sure who on God's green earth that sense of shame actually helps. It certainly doesn't help me. I think one of the reasons that I love teaching and learning is that I don't do well in unstructured social settings like knocking on doors. For all my talk of bucking the systems or redefining teacher-student relationships, I rely on those structures and those scripts. I'm easily embarrassed by my inability to remain appropriate outside of them. But I am fiercely proud of my ability to navigate complex topics in real time. I am fiercely proud of my work on safety and risk management in circus. I am fiercely proud of my students, and I have a powerful sense of my own worth as a coach and as a human being who's just doing his best. In retrospect, I am not ashamed of my ability to knock on those doors or my inability to knock on those doors. My ideal scenario, single-handedly saving the world while looking cool in my jacket, is so blatantly Disneyfied that it's pretty easy for me to dismiss. I went back the next day to my houses with my partner who cringes at cold weather and is one of the most confrontation-avoidant people that I know, but is apparently great at knocking on strangers' doors to ask them if they're going to vote. We knocked on all of my doors, and 5 or so people answered. One of those people wasn't sure who she was going to vote for yet. We said we hoped she'd vote for Kamala, but mostly that she'd just vote. I'm glad that I didn't go by myself. And while I was pretty anxious and embarrassed at the time, I don't look back and feel like a failure. I do wonder, though, do some skills in circus feel this paralyzing to my students? What if I'd had a coach with me that day? Do I see these cycles of hope and shame and pride and anxiety in my students? I came away with a greater sense of awe and appreciation for some of my students. Is this the kind of fear that I'm watching them get over in my classes? They don't even get to wear a cool jacket when they come.